The morning sun touched the old brick buildings of Millbrook with gentle fingers, painting everything gold. Rose Ashford sat behind her jewelry table on Main Street, arranging silver rings and beaded bracelets with careful hands. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her brown hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. 5 years had passed since she left her badge and gun in the police captain's office. 5 years since the night that changed everything. But even now, sitting in this peaceful town square with birds singing and people greeting each other with warm smiles, Rose could not fully escape the memories. She touched the small scar on her left hand absently. It was just a thin white line now, barely visible, but she remembered the moment she got it. The broken glass, the screaming, the terrible silence that followed. "Good morning, Rose," called Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who owned the flower shop across the street. She waved cheerfully, her white hair bright in the sunlight. Rose smiled and waved back. "Good morning, Margaret. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Lovely. I'll come see your new pieces at lunch." This was Rose's life now. Simple, safe. She made jewelry in the evenings in her small apartment above the hardware store. During the day, she sold her work from this table, chatting with customers, watching the slow rhythm of small-town life flow around her like a gentle river. It was not the life she had planned. Back when she was young and fierce, fresh from the police academy with stars in her eyes, she thought she would be a detective forever. She thought she would save people, catch criminals, make the world safer. For 23 years, she did exactly that. She worked hard, earned her detective badge, solved difficult cases. She was good at her job, until she was not. Rose shook her head, pushing the dark thoughts away. She picked up a bracelet she had made the night before, examining the small blue beads that caught the light. Each bead was carefully chosen, each wire carefully wrapped. This work required patience and attention to detail, the same skills she had used in police work. But jewelry could not hurt anyone. Jewelry could not fail when someone needed help. The town square began to fill with people. Tom Chen opened his coffee shop, the rich smell of fresh beans drifting across the street. Young Maria Santos set up her vegetable stand near the fountain, her organic produce bright and fresh. Old Mr. Patterson shuffled to his usual bench with his newspaper, ready to spend the morning watching the world go by and offering comments to anyone who passed. Millbrook was a town of about 8,000 people, nestled in a valley between rolling hills. Most people had lived here their whole lives, or their parents had, or their grandparents. Everyone knew everyone else. There were 2 schools, 1 hospital, 3 churches, a dozen shops on Main Street, and 1 small factory on the edge of town that made furniture parts. It was the kind of place where neighbors helped each other, where children could play outside safely, where the biggest excitement was usually the annual Harvest Festival. For Rose, after the noise and danger and heartbreak of city police work, Millbrook was exactly what she needed. A place to hide, a place to heal, a place to forget. Except Rose could never truly forget.
She arranged her display with practiced movements. The rings went in the velvet-lined box at the front. The bracelets hung on a small wooden tree she had made herself. The necklaces lay on a dark cloth that made the silver shine. Everything had its place. Everything was orderly and controlled. Unlike that night 5 years ago, when everything had spun out of control. "Stop it," Rose whispered to herself. "Stop thinking about it." But the memories never really left. They were always there, waiting in the quiet moments, ready to surface when her guard was down. Her partner's face, Officer James Davidson, just 28 years old, with a wife and a baby daughter at home. He had trusted Rose. They were supposed to check an abandoned warehouse for a suspected drug operation. Simple reconnaissance, nothing dangerous. Or so they thought. But the intel was wrong. The warehouse was not empty. And when the shooting started, Rose closed her eyes, breathing slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The therapist had taught her this technique. When the memories became too strong, just breathe. Ground yourself in the present moment. Feel the sun on your face. Hear the birds singing. Smell the coffee from Tom's shop. She opened her eyes. The panic slowly faded, leaving only the familiar ache of guilt and regret. James had survived. That was something. The bullets had hit his shoulder and leg, not anywhere vital. He recovered, though he walked with a slight limp now. He still worked for the police department, at a desk job. He had forgiven Rose, told her it was not her fault, that anyone could have made the same mistake. But Rose had not forgiven herself. She was the senior partner. She should have checked more carefully. She should have questioned the intel. She should have waited for backup. She should have protected James better. The department had reviewed the incident and cleared her of any wrongdoing. "These things happen," the captain had said. "It was not your fault, Rose. You followed procedure." But Rose could not continue. Every time she put on her uniform, she saw James falling. Every time she entered a building, she heard the gunshots echoing. Every time she looked at her badge, she felt the weight of her failure. So she resigned. She took her savings, left the city, and came to Millbrook. She rented the small apartment, learned to make jewelry from online videos, and started her new life. A life without responsibility. A life without danger. A life where she could not hurt anyone by making mistakes. "Rose, Rose dear." She looked up to see Mrs. Patterson, the dentist's wife, approaching her table. The woman was in her 60s, always perfectly dressed, with pearls around her neck and carefully styled blonde hair. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. How can I help you? I need a gift for my granddaughter." "She's graduating from college next month. Do you have anything special?" Rose smiled, grateful for the distraction. "I have just the thing. I made a new bracelet with rose quartz and freshwater pearls. Very elegant." She showed the piece to Mrs. Patterson, who gasped with delight. "Oh, it's beautiful. Emma will love it." "How much?" They negotiated the price, which was very reasonable because Rose did not make jewelry for profit. She made it to keep her hands busy, to fill the empty hours, to have a purpose. Mrs. Patterson paid and left happy, and Rose wrapped the bracelet in tissue paper and placed it in a small bag. The morning continued peacefully. She sold 3 more pieces, chatted with several neighbors, and ate the sandwich she had brought from home. Mr. Chen brought her a free coffee, as he often did. "You make this corner beautiful," he always said. "The least I can do is keep you caffeinated." It was nearly 2 o'clock when Rose noticed the strangers. 3 men in expensive suits walked into the town square, looking around with the careful eyes of people assessing something. They were not tourists. Tourists came to Millbrook for the hiking trails and the autumn colors, and they wore casual clothes and carried cameras. These men looked like business people. But what business could they possibly have in Millbrook? Rose watched them without seeming to watch. It was an old habit from her police days, the ability to observe people while appearing to focus on something else. She pretended to rearrange her necklaces while tracking the men's movements. They were all in their 40s or 50s, well-groomed, confident. One was tall and thin with silver hair. One was shorter and stocky with a beard. The third was average height, with dark hair slicked back from his forehead. They walked slowly through the square, studying the buildings, sometimes stopping to point at something and talk in low voices. The tall one took out his phone and made a call. He spoke briefly, then hung up and said something to the others. They all nodded and walked toward the old factory at the edge of town. Rose felt a small tingle at the back of her neck. It was nothing. Just businessmen, probably looking at real estate or something equally boring. But that old instinct, the detective's instinct, whispered that something was not quite right about them. She shook her head. It was none of her business. She was not a detective anymore. She was a jewelry maker, and her job was to sit here, sell her work, and enjoy the peaceful life she had built. But she kept thinking about the men as the afternoon wore on. At 5 o'clock, Rose packed up her table. She folded the cloth, placed the jewelry boxes in her carrying case, collapsed the portable table, and carried everything back to her apartment. The apartment was small but comfortable, with a living room, a tiny kitchen, one bedroom, and a bathroom. The living room doubled as her workspace, with a desk covered in tools and supplies for making jewelry. She set down her case and stretched her back, sore from sitting all day. Then she made a simple dinner of pasta and salad, eating while watching the local news on her small television. The news was always the same in Millbrook. A new playground was being built at the elementary school. The Harvest Festival Committee was meeting to plan the event. The high school football team had won its last game. Nothing ever changed in Millbrook. That was the point. After dinner, Rose worked on a new necklace design. She enjoyed this part of the day, the quiet concentration, the feel of the wire in her hands, the way the beads came together into something beautiful. She worked for 2 hours, listening to soft music, letting the peaceful routine soothe her mind. But before bed, she could not stop herself. She opened her laptop and typed the names of the 3 men into a search engine. She had gotten their names earlier, in a way she was not particularly proud of. After they left the square, she had walked casually past the coffee shop, where Tom mentioned that 3 businessmen had just bought coffee and paid with a credit card. Tom, who was friendly and talkative, had chatted with them and learned that they were from a company called Meridian Investments and were exploring opportunities in the area. Rose found their website easily. Meridian Investments was supposedly a venture capital firm based in Chicago, looking to invest in small-town manufacturing and real estate. The 3 men were listed as executives: Richard Holbrook, the tall one with silver hair, Marcus Clay, the stocky bearded one, and David Winters, the one with slicked-back dark hair. Everything looked legitimate. The website was professional. Their LinkedIn profiles seemed normal, but something still bothered Rose. Maybe it was the way they had looked at the town, like they were assessing a target rather than a potential investment. Maybe it was the way they spoke in low voices, as if they did not want to be overheard. Maybe it was just her old paranoia, seeing danger where none existed. Rose closed the laptop and went to bed. It was nothing. She was just being anxious, seeing shadows that were not there. These were just businessmen doing business. But sleep did not come easily, and when it did, she dreamed of abandoned warehouses and gunfire in the dark. The next morning, Rose set up her table as usual. The sun was bright, the birds were singing, and Millbrook looked as peaceful as always. She told herself to forget about the 3 strangers and focus on her jewelry. But at 10 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up in front of the old factory. The 3 men from yesterday got out, along with 2 others Rose had not seen before. They stood outside the factory gates, talking and gesturing at the building. The factory had been built in the 1960s, a long brick building with tall windows and a metal roof. For decades, it had produced furniture parts, employing nearly 200 people from Millbrook and the surrounding towns. But 10 years ago, the company had moved its operations to Mexico, and the factory had closed. Since then, it had sat empty, a sad reminder of better economic times. There had been talk over the years about someone buying it and reopening it, but nothing had ever happened. The building was slowly decaying, its windows broken, its parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds. Now these men from Meridian Investments were looking at it with obvious interest. Rose watched from across the square, her hands working automatically to string beads, while her eyes followed the men. They walked around the building, taking photos with their phones, discussing something intensely. After about 30 minutes, they got back in their SUV and drove away. "Rose, dear, are you all right?" She blinked and looked up. Mrs. Henderson stood in front of her table, a concerned expression on her wrinkled face. "Yes, I'm fine. Sorry, I was just thinking about something." "You looked very focused, almost like you were watching something." Mrs. Henderson glanced across the square. "Were you looking at those businessmen?" "Just curious," Rose said casually. "Do you know anything about them?" "Only what I heard from Betty at the town hall. They're from an investment company. They want to buy the old factory and reopen it. Can you imagine? After all these years. They say they'll bring jobs back to Millbrook." "That would be wonderful," Rose said carefully. "Did Betty say what kind of business they plan to run?" "Something about manufacturing. I don't know the details. But it's such good news. Millbrook could really use the jobs." Mrs. Henderson bought a pair of earrings and left smiling, excited about the possibility of the factory reopening. Rose sat back in her chair, thinking. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe these were just legitimate businessmen who wanted to invest in the town. Maybe the factory would reopen, people would get jobs, and everything would be wonderful. But Rose had been a detective for 23 years. She had learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts were telling her that something was not right about Meridian Investments. Over the next few days, Rose watched and listened. She heard people around town talking excitedly about the factory. The mayor had met with the Meridian Investments executives and announced that they were serious about buying the property and starting a new business. They were offering good wages, benefits, and opportunities for local people. Everyone was happy. Everyone was hopeful. Everyone except Rose. She could not explain exactly what bothered her. The men did everything right. They met with local officials, ate at local restaurants, made donations to the volunteer fire department. They smiled and shook hands and said all the right things about wanting to be part of the community. But Rose kept watching. She noticed that Richard Holbrook, the tall one with silver hair, often made phone calls in his car where no one could hear him. She noticed that Marcus Clay, the bearded one, visited the local bank multiple times, staying inside for long periods. She noticed that David Winters, the dark-haired one, had meetings with the owners of several local businesses, including Tom's coffee shop and a hardware store and a real estate office. It could all be perfectly innocent. They were businessmen doing business research. But Rose's detective instincts whispered that there was more to it. One afternoon, while sitting at her table, Rose saw Richard Holbrook walking across the square. He stopped to buy coffee from Tom, chatting pleasantly. Rose could hear their conversation from where she sat. "So you've been in Millbrook about a week now," Tom said. "What do you think of our little town?" "It's charming," Richard replied smoothly. "Exactly the kind of place where our company wants to invest. Small communities with good people and untapped potential." "When do you think the factory will reopen?" "We're working on the details now. Probably within 6 months, if everything goes according to plan. We need to renovate the building, install new equipment, hire staff. But we're committed to making it happen." "That's great news. A lot of people here need jobs." "We know. That's why we're here. We want to help Millbrook thrive again." Richard paid for his coffee and walked away, leaving Tom smiling. Rose thought about the conversation. Everything Richard said sounded good, but something in his tone, or maybe the way he smiled, made Rose uneasy. She could not stop herself. That evening, she did more research on her laptop. Meridian Investments had a clean record. No lawsuits, no complaints, no negative news articles. But when Rose dug deeper, checking business records and financial filings, she found something interesting. The company was only 3 years old. Before that, there was no trace of it. Richard Holbrook, Marcus Clay, and David Winters had all worked for various companies in the past, but their backgrounds were vague. No clear pattern of expertise in manufacturing or investing. Just a series of short-term positions at different firms, many of which no longer existed. It was not proof of anything illegal. People changed jobs. Companies came and went. But combined with her gut feeling, it made Rose more suspicious. She knew she should drop it. This was not her problem. She was not a detective anymore. She had no authority, no resources, no reason to investigate these men. But she could not help herself. The old training, the old instincts were waking up after 5 years of sleep. The next day, Saturday, was busy at the square. The weekend always brought more people to Main Street. Families shopping, couples having lunch, children playing by the fountain. Rose's table did good business. She sold 6 pieces and had pleasant conversations with a dozen customers. But part of her attention was always on the black SUV parked near the factory. The 3 executives were there again, along with a 4th man Rose had not seen before. This new man was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and expensive clothes. He walked with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. The 4 men went inside the factory building, staying there for over an hour. When they came out, they stood talking in the parking lot. Rose was too far away to hear their words, but she could see their body language. The older man seemed to be giving instructions, and the others listened carefully, nodding and taking notes. Then they all got in the SUV and drove to the Millbrook Community Bank, a small local bank that had served the town for 50 years. They went inside, and Rose watched the clock. They stayed for 90 minutes. What kind of business meeting at a bank took 90 minutes? Rose's mind was racing now, putting pieces together. An investment company with vague backgrounds, multiple meetings with the local bank, interest in an abandoned factory, cash-heavy local businesses. A theory began to form in her mind, a terrible theory that she did not want to believe. Money laundering. It made sense. A small town, far from major cities, with a trusting population and limited law enforcement. An abandoned factory that could be purchased cheaply. A bank that probably did not have sophisticated fraud detection systems. Local businesses that dealt in cash. If someone wanted to launder large amounts of money, making it appear legitimate, this would be a perfect setup. Buy the factory with dirty money. Invest in local businesses. Run money through the bank. Create a complex web of transactions that looked like normal business activity but was actually cleaning criminal profits. Rose sat very still, her heart beating fast. It was just a theory. She had no proof. She could be completely wrong. Maybe these were just legitimate investors who happened to have vague backgrounds and spent a lot of time at banks. But every instinct she had, every lesson learned from 23 years of police work, told her she was right. The question was, what should she do about it? The sensible thing would be to call the police, let them investigate. Let someone with authority and resources handle it. But Rose knew how these things worked. A small-town police department like Millbrook's would not have the expertise or resources to investigate complex financial crimes. They would probably contact the state police or the FBI, and those agencies would need to prioritize. A theory from a retired detective in a small town, with no hard evidence, would likely be ignored or placed at the bottom of a very long list. By the time anyone took it seriously, Meridian Investments would have accomplished whatever they came here to do. The money would be laundered, the criminals would disappear, and Millbrook might be left with serious financial problems. Rose could not let that happen. She packed up her table early that day, her mind made up. She was going to investigate this herself, quietly, carefully, without putting anyone at risk. She would gather evidence, and when she had enough, she would take it to the proper authorities. It was probably foolish. She was not a police officer anymore. She had no backup, no support, no legal authority, and the last time she had tried to be a hero, her partner had almost died. But Rose could not walk away. Not when the people of Millbrook, the kind neighbors who had welcomed her and made her feel safe, were potentially being used and exploited by criminals. She would be careful this time. She would not make the same mistakes. She would not put anyone in danger. She would just watch, listen, and gather information. What could possibly go wrong?
Rose had not done real detective work in 5 years, but the skills came back quickly. That night, she sat at her laptop, creating a file on Meridian investments. She started with what she knew for certain, then added her observations and theories, marking each piece of information as fact, probable, or speculation. Facts. Meridian Investments was a 3-year-old company from Chicago. 3 executives, Richard Holbrook, Marcus Clay, David Winters, had been in Millbrook for 1 week. They had met with the mayor, the bank, and several local business owners. They claimed to want to buy and reopen the old factory. They had spent 90 minutes at the community bank. Their professional backgrounds were vague and inconsistent. Probable. They were not genuine investors. Their interest in Millbrook was not legitimate business. The factory purchase was part of a larger scheme. Speculation. They were laundering money. Local businesses were being used as fronts. The bank was being manipulated. Rose studied her list, then began planning her investigation. She needed more information, but she had to be very careful. If these men really were criminals, they would be watching for anyone taking too much interest in their activities. Fortunately, Rose had the perfect cover. She was just the jewelry lady, sitting at her table in the square every day, chatting with neighbors, selling her handmade pieces. No one would suspect her of anything more serious than deciding which beads matched best. Her table gave her a clear view of the town square, the factory, the bank, and most of Main Street. She could watch everything while appearing to do nothing but wait for customers. The next Monday morning, Rose arrived at her usual spot with a new plan. She had brought a small notebook, hidden in her jewelry case, where she could write down observations. She had also charged her phone fully, ready to take photos if necessary. At 9:30, the black SUV arrived. The 3 executives plus the older man Rose had seen on Saturday got out and went into the bank again. Rose casually took out her phone and pretended to check messages while actually photographing the SUV's license plate. The men stayed in the bank for an hour. When they came out, they walked to Tom's coffee shop. Rose could hear their conversation from her table. "Everything is proceeding smoothly," the older man said. His voice was deep and confident. "The bank manager is cooperative. We should have everything in place within 2 weeks." "What about the business owners?" David Winters asked. "Most are eager to participate. They see it as an opportunity for investment and growth. They don't understand the full picture, of course." The men laughed, and Rose felt cold. Her theory was right. These men were using Millbrook's trust and economic desperation against its residents. After getting their coffee, the men walked to the factory. Rose waited 5 minutes, then stood up and stretched, as if taking a break from sitting. She walked slowly across the square, pretending to enjoy the sunny morning, until she was close enough to the factory to see what the men were doing. They were inside, visible through the broken windows. They appeared to be measuring spaces and taking notes. Rose took out her phone again, this time genuinely checking messages, but positioning herself so she could see through the factory windows. She watched for 10 minutes, noting everything in her memory. Then she walked back to her table before anyone could wonder why the jewelry lady was standing near an abandoned factory. That afternoon, Marcus Clay visited 3 local businesses: the hardware store, the real estate office, and a small restaurant called the Millbrook Diner. He spent about 30 minutes in each place, carrying a briefcase and appearing to have serious discussions with the owners. Rose knew the owners of all three businesses. Frank Patterson owned the hardware store, a family business started by his grandfather. Linda Morrison ran the real estate office, helping people in Millbrook buy and sell homes for 20 years. And the Millbrook Diner was owned by Jose and Maria Garcia, who had come to America from Mexico 30 years ago and built a successful business through hard work and excellent food. All good people, all honest people, all people who would never knowingly participate in money laundering. After Marcus left the diner, Rose walked over, timing it to arrive during the slow period between lunch and dinner. Maria was wiping tables, and she smiled when Rose entered. "Rose, how nice to see you. Are you hungry?" "Just thirsty. Could I have an iced tea?" Of course, of course. Sit." Rose sat at the counter while Maria poured her tea. They chatted about the weather, about Maria's grandchildren, about the upcoming harvest festival. Then Rose said casually, "I saw a businessman talking to you earlier." "Was he from that investment company everyone is talking about?" "Yes," Maria's face lit up. "Mr. Clay. Very nice man. He wants to make an investment in our diner." Rose kept her expression neutral. "Really? What kind of investment?" "He says his company wants to help local businesses expand. They will give us money to renovate the kitchen, buy new equipment, maybe add more tables, and we will pay them back slowly, with very low interest. It's like a loan, but better." "That sounds generous," Rose said carefully. "What do they get out of it?" Maria shrugged. "He says they make profit from the interest, and they help the community grow, which makes their other investments more valuable. It's good for everyone, he says." "Did he ask you to do anything in return? Any special requirements?" "Well, he wants us to use a specific supplier for our food. And he wants us to process all our payments through a new system his company provides. He says it's more efficient and will save us money, and he wants to invest $75,000. Rose's mind was racing. A specific supplier, likely controlled by Meridian Investments. A payment processing system they controlled. $75,000 in cash flowing through the diner, mixed with the legitimate business income, making dirty money look clean. "Maria, can I ask you to do something?" "Of course, dear." "What is it?" "Before you sign any papers with this company, would you let a lawyer look at them? Just to make sure everything is fair?" Maria looked puzzled. "A lawyer? But Mr. Clay says everything is standard business practice." "I'm sure it is," Rose said gently. "But it never hurts to have a professional review important financial documents. It's a big decision, investing that much money in your business." "That's true. We have worked very hard to build this diner. We should be careful." Maria nodded. "Yes, I will ask a lawyer to look at the papers." "Thank you, Rose. You are very wise." Rose finished her tea and left, her mind working furiously. She had probably just saved Maria and Jose from making a terrible mistake. But how many other business owners had already agreed to similar deals? And how could she warn them without revealing her suspicions and potentially alerting Meridian Investments? She needed more information. She needed to understand the full scope of the operation. That evening, Rose did something she had not done in 5 years. She called her old captain from the city police department. Captain Sarah Mitchell answered on the 3rd ring. "Rose? This is a surprise. How are you?" "I'm well, Sarah. Living quietly in a small town, making jewelry. I heard. I'm glad you found some peace. What can I do for you?" Rose hesitated. She had left the force under difficult circumstances, haunted by guilt and self-doubt. She had cut ties with almost everyone, needing to start fresh. Calling Sarah now felt like stepping back into a world she had tried to leave behind. But she needed help. "Sarah, I need some advice. Unofficial advice just between friends. Of course. What's going on? There's a company in town that I think might be involved in money laundering. But I have no hard evidence, just suspicions based on behavior patterns. If I were still a detective, what would be my next steps? There was a pause. Then Sarah said, Rose, are you investigating something? Because you know you don't have any authority anymore. You can't. I know. I'm not trying to investigate officially. I just want to understand what I'm seeing, and maybe gather enough information to pass to the proper authorities if my suspicions are correct. Another pause. Rose could imagine Sarah's expression, a mix of concern and understanding. All right, Sarah finally said. Hypothetically, if you suspected money laundering, you would want to establish patterns. Follow the money. Look for transactions that don't make business sense. Multiple companies controlled by the same people. Cash-intensive businesses being used as fronts. Unusual banking activity. How would I document that without official access to financial records? You can't access private financial records legally, but you can observe public behavior, take notes, photographs, record conversations if you're part of them, though laws vary by state. Gather everything you can through legal public channels. Then, if you have enough to suggest a crime is happening, you contact the FBI or the state attorney general's office. They have the resources to investigate financial crimes properly. The FBI won't take me seriously without evidence. Then gather evidence. But Rose, Sarah's voice became very serious. Be careful. If you're right about this, you're dealing with criminals who will not appreciate being exposed. You're not a cop anymore. You don't have backup. You don't have a gun. You don't have legal protection. If you put yourself in danger. I won't, Rose promised. I learned my lesson 5 years ago. I'm just going to watch and document. Nothing risky. I hope that's true. Call me if you need anything. And Rose, stay safe. After hanging up, Rose felt both energized and afraid. She was really doing this. She was investigating criminals again. The smart part of her brain screamed that this was foolish, that she should just call the FBI and let them handle it. But she knew the FBI would need evidence before they would act. And by the time they gathered that evidence, if they even took her seriously, Meridian Investments would have accomplished their goals and disappeared. Rose had to do this herself. Over the next week, she became a silent observer of everything happening in Millbrook. She sat at her jewelry table from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, watching and documenting. She saw Richard Holbrook meet with the mayor 3 times. She saw Marcus Clay visit 7 different local businesses. She saw David Winters go to the bank every single day, sometimes twice a day. She saw the older man, whose name she learned was Mr. Lawrence Chen, arrive in a private car and have closed-door meetings with the others. She photographed license plates. She noted times and dates. She listened to conversations. She chatted with business owners and gently asked questions about their interactions with Meridian Investments. What she discovered horrified her. Meridian Investments had approached at least 15 local businesses with investment opportunities. The pattern was always the same. They offered to invest large amounts of money, usually between $50,000 and $100,000, to help the businesses expand or improve. In return, the businesses had to use specific suppliers, use a specific payment processing system, and allow Meridian Investments to handle certain financial transactions. The businesses saw it as a wonderful opportunity. Millbrook had been struggling economically for years. Many businesses were just barely surviving. The promise of investment capital, with low interest and generous terms, seemed like a miracle. But Rose understood what was really happening. The investment money was dirty, probably from drug sales or other criminal enterprises. By flowing it through legitimate businesses in Millbrook, Meridian Investments was making it appear clean. The businesses would unknowingly process illegal money through their accounts, mixing it with legitimate sales. The payment system Meridian controlled would further obscure the money trail, and the specific suppliers were probably shell companies, also controlled by Meridian, creating even more layers of fake transactions. It was sophisticated and subtle. The people of Millbrook thought they were getting help. They had no idea they were being used to clean criminal money, and that when the operation was eventually discovered, they could face legal consequences even though they were innocent victims. Rose had to stop it. But how? She considered her options. She could go to the local police, but Chief Barnes was a good man with limited resources and no experience with complex financial crimes. He would probably believe her, but he would not know what to do. She could go directly to the FBI, but without hard evidence, they might not take her seriously. Or worse, they might start an investigation that would alert Meridian Investments, causing them to flee before anyone could gather the necessary evidence to prosecute them. She could warn the business owners, but most of them had already signed agreements, and if Meridian Investments found out someone was interfering with their operation, they might become dangerous. Rose needed to think carefully about her next move. She needed a plan that would protect the innocent people of Millbrook while exposing the criminals. On Friday evening, exactly 2 weeks after she had first seen the 3 executives in town, Rose sat in her apartment reviewing everything she had learned. Her notebook was full of observations. Her phone had dozens of photographs. She had a clear picture of what Meridian Investments was doing. But she still did not have hard evidence. Everything she had was circumstantial. Suspicious behavior, yes, but nothing that proved a crime. She needed to get inside their operation somehow. She needed documents, financial records, something concrete. And then, as she sat thinking, her phone rang. It was Tom Chen from the coffee shop. "Rose, I hope I'm not bothering you, but I wanted to ask your advice about something." "Of course, Tom. What is it?" "Those businessmen from Meridian Investments came to see me today. They want to invest in my coffee shop. $50,000 to expand the space, add more seating, maybe offer light lunch items. It sounds like a great opportunity, but I remember you asking Maria to have a lawyer review her agreement. Is there something I should be worried about?" Rose took a deep breath. This was it. This was her chance. "Tom, I think you should be very careful about this company. I have some concerns about their business practices. Would you be willing to let me see the documents they gave you before you sign anything?" "Sure, of course. I trust your judgment. They gave me a contract and some financial projections. Can I bring them to you?" "Yes, please. As soon as possible." Tom arrived at her apartment 20 minutes later with a folder of documents. Rose made tea while he explained what Meridian Investments had proposed. "They say the investment will help me compete with the chain coffee shops in the bigger towns nearby. They'll provide the capital, I'll run the business as usual, and I'll pay them back over 5 years with low interest. It seems almost too good to be true." "It probably is," Rose said gently. She opened the folder and began reading. The documents looked professional and legitimate on the surface, but as Rose read carefully, she saw the trap. The contract gave Meridian Investments control over Tom's bank accounts. It required him to use their payment processing system exclusively. It specified that he must purchase coffee and supplies from their designated vendors. It included clauses about financial reporting that would allow Meridian to run transactions through Tom's business accounts. In simple terms, it gave them complete control over his business's money flow, allowing them to launder criminal funds through his legitimate coffee shop while Tom unknowingly participated in the scheme. "Tom," Rose said slowly, "I don't think you should sign this." "Why not? What's wrong with it?" Rose knew she had to be careful. If she revealed too much, Tom might confront Meridian Investments, which could be dangerous. But she had to stop him from signing this agreement. "These terms give them too much control over your business. Look at this clause here. They can run any transactions they want through your accounts. And this one requires you to buy from their suppliers even if you can find cheaper options elsewhere. This isn't an investment. This is them taking over your business. Tom read the sections she pointed out, his expression growing concerned. I didn't understand all this legal language. It seemed standard to me. It's not standard. This is very unusual. I think you should have a lawyer review it, and I think you should ask Meridian Investments a lot of questions before you agree to anything. You really think something is wrong? Rose made a decision. She trusted Tom. He was kind, honest, and sensible, and she needed an ally. Tom, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to keep it completely confidential. Can you promise me that? Of course. I used to be a police detective before I came to Millbrook. And I think Meridian Investments is using our town for illegal purposes. I think they're laundering money through local businesses. I don't have proof yet, but I'm working on getting it. Tom stared at her in shock. You're serious? These men are criminals? I believe so, yes. That's why I need you not to sign this contract. And I need you to help me. May I keep these documents? I want to show them to someone who can verify my suspicions. Yes, take them. Take whatever you need. Rose, if what you're saying is true, we have to warn everyone. Not yet. If we alarm Meridian Investments before we have evidence, they'll disappear, and we'll never be able to prove what they did. We need to be smart and careful. Can you help me with that? Tom nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? For now, just stall them. Tell them you need more time to think about it. Don't let them know you're suspicious. And keep your eyes and ears open. If you hear anything useful, let me know. All right. I can do that. Rose, thank you for trusting me with this. After Tom left, Rose scanned all the documents and emailed them to Sarah Mitchell with a note. This is what I'm dealing with. Can you confirm my suspicions? Sarah replied within an hour. This is definitely money laundering setup. These clauses are designed to give them complete control over cash flow. You need to contact the FBI immediately. This is serious, Rose. Rose stared at the email. Sarah was right. This was serious. This was exactly the kind of crime that federal agencies needed to handle. But Rose also knew that bureaucracy moved slowly. If she contacted the FBI now, it could take weeks or even months for them to act. By then, Meridian Investments would have laundered their money and left Millbrook, possibly leaving the innocent business owners to face legal consequences. No, Rose needed to gather more evidence first. She needed to build a case so strong that the FBI would have to act immediately. She needed to be a detective again, just for a little while longer. Part 4. Deeper into Danger. The next week, Rose intensified her observations. She arrived at her table earlier each morning and stayed later each evening. She documented everything, every meeting, every transaction, every person who came and went from the black SUV. She also did something she probably should not have done. She started following the Meridian Investments executives. It was risky. If they noticed her, they would know someone was watching them. But Rose was careful. She used techniques she had learned in police work, varying her appearance, keeping distance, using reflections and other people as cover. She followed Marcus Clay to the bank and watched through the window as he met with the manager, George Wilson. George was a nervous man in his 50s who had run the Millbrook Community Bank for 15 years. Rose watched their body language carefully. George seemed uncomfortable, even frightened. Marcus appeared to be giving him instructions, and George was nodding obediently. The bank manager was not a willing participant. He was being coerced somehow. Rose made a note to talk to George. But she had to be very careful about how she approached him. She followed David Winters to several businesses, watching as he charmed the owners with his smooth talk and professional manner. She saw him at the hardware store, the diner, the real estate office, and a small gift shop owned by an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen. She followed Richard Holbrook to a meeting with the mayor. They had lunch at Millbrook's only upscale restaurant, sitting on the outdoor patio where Rose could watch from a distance. The mayor, William Thompson, looked very pleased about something. Richard handed him what appeared to be a check. The mayor smiled broadly and shook Richard's hand. Rose's heart sank. Was the mayor involved? Or was he just an innocent victim being manipulated like everyone else? She took photos of everything, careful to never point her phone obviously at anyone. Just casual pictures of the town square, the buildings, the trees, with the subjects of her interest accidentally in the frame. One afternoon, she saw Lawrence Chen, the older man, arrive at the factory with a different person. This new man was younger, maybe 30, wearing jeans and a casual shirt. He had the hard look of someone who had seen violence. Rose's detective instincts immediately labeled him as security or muscle. They went into the factory together, and Rose wished desperately that she could hear their conversation. But the factory was across the square, too far away, and approaching it would be too obvious. She needed to get closer to their operation somehow. She needed to hear what they were saying, see what documents they were creating, understand the full scope of their scheme. An idea began forming in her mind. It was dangerous. It was probably foolish, but it might work. That evening, Rose created a false identity online. She made a Facebook profile for a fictional person named Elizabeth Waters, a businesswoman from a nearby city who was interested in investing in small-town businesses. She used stock photos for the profile picture and created a convincing background story. Then she sent a message to Meridian Investments through their website, expressing interest in their projects and asking if she could meet with them to discuss potential partnerships. It was a long shot. They probably vetted their contacts carefully, but Rose wrote a professional, business-like message that she hoped would intrigue them. 2 days later, she received a response. Richard Holbrook himself replied, saying he would be happy to meet with Elizabeth Waters to discuss opportunities. Could she come to Millbrook next Tuesday? Rose's heart raced as she typed a response confirming the meeting. She was actually going to walk into their operation, talk to them face to face, and hopefully learn something useful. But she needed a disguise. The Meridian executives had seen her at her jewelry table multiple times. If she showed up looking like herself, they would recognize her immediately. Rose spent the weekend transforming herself. She bought a blonde wig that changed her appearance dramatically. She found business clothes at a thrift store, professional and expensive looking. She practiced wearing colored contact lenses that changed her brown eyes to blue. She studied Elizabeth Waters' fake social media profiles until she could talk about that fictional life convincingly. When she looked at herself in the mirror on Tuesday morning, she barely recognized herself. The gray-streaked brown hair was hidden under sleek blonde hair. The casual jewelry maker clothes were replaced by a crisp business suit. The warm, friendly expression she usually wore was replaced by a cool, professional demeanor. She looked like a successful businesswoman, nothing like the quiet jewelry lady who sat in the town square. Rose took a deep breath. This was it. She was going undercover, something she had not done since her police days. If they discovered who she really was, there could be serious consequences, but she had to try. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at the factory. Rose arrived 10 minutes early, parking her old car around the corner where it would not be visible. She walked to the factory entrance, her heart pounding, but her expression calm and confident.
Richard Holbrook met her at the door, smiling warmly. "Miss Waters!" "Welcome. Thank you for making the drive to our little town." "Thank you for meeting with me," Rose said, using a slightly different voice than her normal tone, more clipped and businesslike. "I've been very interested in learning more about your investment strategies." "Excellent. Please come in."
He led her inside the factory, which had been partially cleaned and renovated. One corner had been set up as a temporary office, with desks, computers, and filing cabinets. Marcus Clay and David Winters were there, working on laptops. "Gentlemen, this is Elizabeth Waters, the investor I mentioned. Ms. Waters, my colleagues Marcus Clay and David Winters." They shook hands, and Rose studied them carefully, while maintaining her businesslike facade. These were the men she had been watching for weeks. Now she was standing in their office, surrounded by their operation. "So, Ms. Waters," Richard said, gesturing for her to sit, "tell me about your interest in our work." Rose had prepared her story carefully. "I've been successful in real estate investments in the city, but I'm looking to diversify. Small-town manufacturing and business development seem like an undervalued market. Your company appears to be pioneering some interesting strategies." "Indeed we are. Small towns like Millbrook offer unique opportunities. The economic climate, the community support, the lack of regulatory oversight." Richard smiled. "By which I mean, the regulations are simpler and more straightforward than in major cities." Rose nodded, catching the real meaning. Less oversight meant easier to hide illegal activity. "I'm particularly interested in how you structure your business relationships," she said. "The partnerships with local businesses, the banking arrangements, the supply chains. It seems very integrated." "Integrated is exactly the right word," Marcus said, leaning forward. "We don't just invest money and walk away. We become part of the entire operation. We control the flow of capital, the vendors, the transactions. It creates efficiency and ensures our investments are protected. And it creates the perfect environment for money laundering," Rose thought, but did not say. "How much capital are we talking about?" she asked. "What kind of scale?" Richard and Marcus exchanged a glance. Then Richard said, "That depends on your level of commitment. For a serious partner, someone who understands the full scope of our operations, we're talking about millions of dollars moving through these channels annually." Millions. Rose had suspected it was significant, but hearing it confirmed was shocking. "And your investors?" Rose continued carefully. "I assume they value discretion? Privacy in their financial affairs?" Another exchanged glance. David Winters spoke for the first time. "Our investors require absolute confidentiality. Many of them prefer to keep their wealth management strategies private, for various reasons." "Because the wealth is illegal," Rose thought. "I understand completely," she said aloud. "Discretion is very important to me as well." "I'm glad to hear that," Richard said. "Because what we're doing here requires partners who understand that not everything needs to be public knowledge. The IRS, for example, doesn't need to know every detail of every transaction." There it was, a clear admission that they were hiding financial information from the government. Rose kept her expression neutral, but inside she was celebrating. If she could record this conversation. But she had not thought to bring a recording device. That was a mistake. She would have to remember everything and write it down later. They talked for another 30 minutes. Rose asked careful questions, and the Meridian executives, believing she was a potential partner, gave her detailed information about their operation. They talked about the 15 businesses they were investing in. They mentioned plans to expand to other small towns once the Millbrook operation was fully established. They discussed the banking arrangements with George Wilson, who was very cooperative after they had helped him understand the benefits of working with us. Rose understood what that meant. They were blackmailing or threatening George somehow. Finally, Richard said, "Ms. Waters, you seem like exactly the kind of partner we're looking for. Someone sophisticated, who understands how business really works. Would you be interested in investing with us?" This was the moment. Rose had to decide how far to take this deception. "I'm very interested," she said slowly, "but I would need to see documentation, financial projections, legal contracts, proof of the returns you're claiming. I don't invest based on promises alone." Of course," Richard said smoothly. "Very wise. We'll prepare a complete package for you. How long are you in town?" "I'm staying nearby for a few days. I wanted to see Millbrook myself, get a feel for the community." "Excellent. Why don't you come back on Thursday? We'll have everything ready for you then." They shook hands again, and Rose left the factory, her mind racing. She had gotten so much information, clear evidence that they were hiding transactions from the IRS. Confirmation that they were controlling multiple businesses, mention of millions of dollars. But she still did not have hard evidence, documents, bank records, something that would prove their crimes beyond doubt. She needed to come back on Thursday and see what papers they would give her. But she also needed to be very careful. These men were clearly experienced criminals, if they suspected anything. Rose drove back to her apartment and immediately wrote down everything from the meeting while it was fresh in her memory. Every word, every admission, every detail. Then she called Sarah Mitchell. "I did something risky," Rose admitted when Sarah answered. "What did you do?" Rose explained the undercover meeting. There was a long silence on the other end. "Rose, that was incredibly dangerous. If they had recognized you, or if they had checked your background more carefully—" "I know. But I got good information. They admitted to hiding transactions from the IRS. They talked about millions of dollars. They're definitely laundering money, Sarah." "Then it's time to contact the FBI. You have enough to get their attention now." "But I don't have documents." "I don't have proof. Just my word about what they said." "Your word is credible. You were a decorated detective for 23 years. I was a decorated detective who resigned after my partner got shot because I made mistakes. Will the FBI trust my judgment?" Sarah sighed. "I don't know. But Rose, you can't keep doing this alone. It's too dangerous. I'm going to one more meeting on Thursday. They're going to give me documents. Once I have those, I'll take everything to the FBI. I promise. Be careful. Please. I will." After hanging up, Rose sat in her apartment thinking. Thursday was 2 days away. She needed to prepare carefully for that meeting, and she needed a backup plan in case something went wrong. She wrote down everything she knew and emailed it to Sarah, along with copies of all the photos she had taken. "If something happens to me," she wrote, "make sure this information gets to the FBI." Then she went back to her normal life, setting up her jewelry table on Wednesday morning as if nothing had changed. But she watched the factory constantly, noting everyone who came and went. That afternoon, she saw something that made her blood run cold. George Wilson, the bank manager, arrived at the factory looking terrified. He was escorted inside by the man who looked like security. They stayed inside for 20 minutes. When George came out, he was visibly shaking, his face pale. They were definitely threatening him. Rose needed to talk to George to find out what they were holding over him. That evening, she went to George's house, a modest home on a quiet street. She knocked on the door, and George answered, looking surprised and anxious. "Rose? What are you doing here?" "George, I need to talk to you about Meridian Investments. Can I come in?" His face went even paler. "I can't talk about that. I signed confidentiality agreements. I could lose my job." "George, they're using you to launder money. You know that, don't you?" He looked around nervously, as if afraid someone might be listening. Then he stepped outside and closed the door behind him, speaking in a low voice. "Rose, you don't understand. I don't have a choice. They're threatening you. Tell me what they have on you." George's eyes filled with tears. "My son. He's in college, and he got into some trouble last year. Drug possession, a small amount, but enough to ruin his future. The charges were dropped, but only because Marcus Clay made it happen. He has connections, he says. And now he says if I don't cooperate, those charges will come back, and my son will go to jail." Rose felt a surge of anger. These criminals were exploiting a father's love for his child, using fear and blackmail to force an innocent man to help them. "George, listen to me. I used to be a police detective. I know how these situations work. If you cooperate with them, you become part of their crime. When this operation is discovered, and it will be, you could go to jail for money laundering. Is that what you want? No, but if you cooperate with law enforcement, if you help expose these criminals, you can get immunity. You can protect yourself and your son. The FBI makes deals with people who help them catch bigger criminals. George looked torn, hope and fear battling in his expression. You really think so? I know so. But you have to be brave. You have to help me gather evidence against Meridian Investments. Will you do that? He hesitated for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need? Banking records, transaction histories, anything that shows how they're moving money through the bank. Can you access that? Yes, but if they find out? They won't. I'll protect you, and once we have the evidence, I'll contact the FBI immediately. This will be over soon, George. I promise. He nodded again, looking less terrified and more determined. All right, I'll get you the records. But Rose, be careful. These men are dangerous. I heard them talking once about what they do to people who interfere with their business. It wasn't pleasant. Rose felt a chill, but kept her expression calm. I'll be careful. Thank you, George. You're doing the right thing. She walked back to her apartment, her mind working furiously. She had an ally now, someone who could provide the hard evidence she needed. But she had also confirmed that Meridian Investments was willing to threaten people, to use violence if necessary. She was in deeper than she had anticipated. This was not just about money laundering anymore. This was about protecting innocent people from dangerous criminals. Rose thought about her meeting on Thursday, about going back into that factory, surrounded by these men, pretending to be someone she was not. It was risky. It could go wrong in so many ways, but she had to do it. For George, for Maria and Jose, for Tom, for all the good people of Millbrook who had welcomed her and given her a peaceful place to heal. She would be careful. She would be smart. She would not make the same mistakes she had made 5 years ago. This time, she would get it right. Part 5. The Final Confrontation. Thursday morning dawned gray and cloudy, matching Rose's anxious mood. She sat at her jewelry table, trying to appear normal, but her mind was on the afternoon meeting. She had prepared carefully, wearing the same disguise as before, rehearsing her cover story, planning what questions to ask. At noon, George Wilson came to her table, pretending to look at jewelry. He discreetly handed her a USB drive. Everything is on there, he whispered. Transaction records for the past 2 weeks. You can see exactly how they're moving money through the bank. Multiple accounts, complex transfers, money coming from shell companies and going out to other shell companies. It's all there. Thank you, George. You're very brave. I hope this works, Rose. I'm terrified. It will work. Trust me. After George left, Rose went back to her apartment and looked at the files on the USB drive. Her detective's eye immediately recognized the patterns. This was textbook money laundering. Millions of dollars flowing through the Millbrook Community Bank in a complex web of transactions designed to obscure the original source of the money. This was the evidence she needed. With this, and the information from her meetings, she had a strong case to present to the FBI. But first, she had one more meeting. At 2 o'clock, Rose arrived at the factory as Elizabeth Waters. Richard Holbrook greeted her warmly. Miss Waters! Welcome back. I think you'll be very pleased with what we've prepared for you. He led her to the office area, where a folder of documents waited on the desk. Rose sat down and began reading. It was all there. Investment contracts that gave Meridian Investments complete control over business finances. Financial projections that showed impossible returns. Legal language that was designed to trap participants in a web of complicity. And several documents that should not have been left out for her to see. Rose tried not to show her shock as she recognized what she was looking at. Internal memos discussing cleaning operations, and moving product through the channels. References to drug shipments and criminal organizations. Bank account numbers for offshore entities. They were being careless. They thought Elizabeth Waters was a potential partner, so they were showing her too much. Or was it a trap? Rose looked up to find all three men watching her with calculating expressions. "This is quite comprehensive," she said carefully, keeping her voice steady. "We believe in transparency with our partners," Richard said, but his smile did not reach his eyes. Rose's detective instincts were screaming danger. Something was wrong. They were too calm, too confident. "I noticed some of these documents mention activities that might not be entirely legal," Rose said, testing them. "That depends on your definition of legal," Marcus said. "We prefer to think of it as creative financial management." "I see." Rose gathered the documents carefully, trying to think of a way to leave without appearing suspicious. "This is a lot to review. I'd like to take these with me and have my attorney look them over." "I'm afraid we can't let these documents leave this building," David said. His tone was polite but firm. "Too much sensitive information." "Of course." "I understand. Then I'll need more time to review them here." "Take all the time you need," Richard said. "We have nowhere to be." They were blocking her in. Rose felt the walls closing around her, the same feeling she had experienced in that warehouse 5 years ago, the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. She forced herself to stay calm. "Actually, I just realized I have a phone call scheduled for 3 o'clock. An important client. I should take it. Could we continue this tomorrow?" "That won't be necessary," a new voice said. Lawrence Chen entered the office, the older man Rose had seen several times before. Behind him was the younger man who looked like security, and he was holding a gun. Rose's blood turned to ice. "You see, Ms. Waters," Lawrence said, "or should I say Ms. Ashford, we know exactly who you are." "How? How did they know?" "I don't know what you mean," Rose said, but her voice wavered. "Please don't insult our intelligence. Did you think we wouldn't notice the jewelry lady paying such close attention to our business? Did you think we wouldn't check the background of someone calling herself Elizabeth Waters? There is no Elizabeth Waters. Those social media profiles were created just last week. The photos are stock images. You're not an investor. You're a former police detective who has been watching us for over 2 weeks. Rose stood up slowly, her mind racing through options. The door was behind Lawrence and his armed associate. The windows were high and barred. She was trapped. "Very observant," she said, dropping the fake voice. "So what now? You're going to kill a former police officer? That will bring every law enforcement agency in the state down on you." "We're not going to kill you," Lawrence said. "We're going to make you disappear." "There's a difference. You'll be another sad story of a depressed ex-cop who couldn't handle civilian life. They'll find your car abandoned somewhere with a suicide note. Very tragic." Rose felt fear grip her, but she pushed it down. She had been in dangerous situations before. She just needed to think clearly. "People know I'm here," she said. "If I disappear, they'll investigate." "Will they?" "You're a loner who lives alone, has no close relationships, rarely talks to anyone beyond casual conversation. Who exactly will miss you? Who will even notice you're gone?" He was right, Rose realized with despair. She had isolated herself so completely that no one would question her absence for days, maybe weeks, except... "I sent all my evidence to the FBI this morning," Rose lied. "Everything I've learned about your operation. If something happens to me, they'll know you were responsible." Lawrence smiled coldly. "An obvious bluff, Ms. Ashford. If you had contacted the FBI, we would already be under investigation. You've been working alone, gathering information, playing detective. But you're not a detective anymore. You're just a broken woman who should have minded her own business." The man with the gun moved closer. Rose calculated the distance, the angle, the possibility of fighting back. But she was not trained in combat. She was 52 years old, unarmed, facing a younger man with a weapon. She had no physical chance of escape. But maybe she had another option. "Wait," she said. "Before you do this, I want to understand something. Why Millbrook? There must be easier places to launder money than a small town." Lawrence seemed pleased to explain, enjoying his moment of superiority. "That's exactly why Millbrook is perfect. Small towns are trusting. They don't have sophisticated financial oversight. Local banks don't have the technology to detect complex laundering schemes. And the people are desperate enough for economic help that they ask no questions when someone offers them investment opportunities. And the business owners? The people you're using? You don't care that you're putting them at risk? They're collateral damage, acceptable losses in a larger operation." Rose felt anger burn through her fear. These men had no conscience, no empathy. They saw the good people of Millbrook as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. "You won't get away with this," she said. "We already have. This operation has run successfully in 4 other towns. We come in, launder money for 6 months, then disappear before anyone notices. Millbrook is just our latest location. And you, Ms. Ashford, are just an inconvenient obstacle to be removed." The gunman raised his weapon, pointing it at Rose's chest. This was it. This was how it would end. Not in a blaze of glory, but executed in an abandoned factory by criminals she had tried to stop. Rose thought of James Davidson, her former partner. She thought of the guilt she had carried for 5 years. Maybe this was her punishment for failing him. But then she thought of Maria and Jose, of Tom, of George, of all the people in Millbrook who had shown her kindness. They deserved better. They deserved to be protected. And Rose was not ready to give up. "You're making a mistake," she said, stalling for time. "I'm not the only one who knows about your operation." "Another bluff?" "No. I told several people what I suspected. Tom Chen, Maria Garcia, George Wilson. If I disappear, they'll know why. They'll talk. The FBI will come." Lawrence's confident expression wavered slightly. "You're lying." "Am I? You can kill me, but you can't silence everyone. Millbrook is a small town. People talk, and once people start talking about Meridian investments and suspicious business practices, your whole operation falls apart." It was partially a lie. Rose had told Tom and George, but not Maria. But Lawrence did not know that. "Even if that's true," Lawrence said after a moment, "we can disappear long before any investigation reaches us, but it would be inconvenient. Marcus, go find Tom Chen and bring him here, and find George Wilson. We need to ensure their silence as well. Number." Rose had made things worse. Now Tom and George were in danger too.
"Don't," Rose said desperately. "They don't know anything specific. I didn't tell them details. Hurting them will only create more attention." But Marcus was already leaving, pulling out his phone. Rose had to do something. She had to stop this. But what could she do, unarmed and trapped? And then she heard it. A sound outside. Multiple cars arriving, doors slamming, voices. Lawrence heard it too. He went to the window and looked out, his face going pale. "It's the FBI," he said.
How? Rose had not called them. Unless Sarah Mitchell had called them after Rose sent her that email with all the evidence. Sarah must have decided Rose was in too much danger and contacted the authorities herself. "Everyone stay calm," Lawrence said, but his voice was tight with panic. "Richard, get rid of the documents." "David, wipe the computers. We can still— FBI! Everyone inside, come out with your hands up." The voice boomed through a bullhorn, echoing through the factory. Lawrence and his associates looked at each other, clearly trying to decide whether to fight or surrender. The gunman still had his weapon pointed at Rose. "Let me go," Rose said. "Surrender now. It's over." "Not yet," Lawrence said grimly. He grabbed Rose's arm, pulling her in front of him like a shield. She's our way out. We'll use her as a hostage." Rose felt the cold metal of the gun pressed against her temple. She had been trying to save Millbrook, but now she might die anyway. The factory door burst open, and FBI agents in tactical gear poured in, weapons drawn. FBI, drop your weapons. Everything happened very fast. The gunman hesitated, caught between Lawrence's orders and the overwhelming force of federal agents. Richard and David raised their hands immediately, surrendering. Marcus, who was still near the door, tried to run and was tackled by 2 agents. Lawrence kept his grip on Rose, the gun still pressed to her head. "Stay back or I'll kill her," he shouted. An FBI negotiator stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. "Let's talk about this, Mr. Chen. There's no way out. Let the woman go and no one gets hurt. If I let her go, I go to prison for the rest of my life. If you hurt her, it's much worse. Right now, this is financial crimes. Don't make it murder." Rose could feel Lawrence's hand shaking. He was desperate, unpredictable. This could end very badly. She thought about James Davidson, about how she had failed to protect him 5 years ago, about the guilt she had carried ever since. She had one chance to make things right. Rose went limp, dropping her full weight suddenly. The unexpected movement threw Lawrence off balance. He stumbled, loosening his grip for just a second. That second was all the FBI agents needed. 2 of them rushed forward, one grabbing Lawrence's gun arm and forcing it up, the other pulling Rose away to safety. Lawrence fought, but it was hopeless. Within seconds, he was face down on the floor, handcuffed, his weapon secured. Rose collapsed against the wall, shaking with adrenaline and relief. She was alive. She had survived. An FBI agent helped her stand. "Are you Rose Ashford?" "Yes." "You're safe now. We need to get a statement from you, but first let's get you outside and checked by paramedics." As Rose was led out of the factory, she saw the entire Meridian Investments crew in handcuffs. Richard Holbrook, Marcus Clay, David Winters, Lawrence Chen, and the gunman whose name she had never learned. They were all being loaded into FBI vehicles. Outside, it seemed like the entire town had gathered. Police cars, FBI vehicles, ambulances, and curious neighbors all crowded around the factory. Rose saw Tom Chen in the crowd looking worried. When he saw her, his face lit up with relief. "Rose, thank God you're okay." The FBI had apparently arrived just in time before Marcus could reach Tom. But how had they known to come? Sarah Mitchell appeared in the crowd, rushing over to embrace Rose. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" "After you sent me that evidence yesterday, I got worried. You were clearly planning something risky, so I contacted my old friend at the FBI and convinced him to look at your case immediately. When you didn't answer your phone this afternoon, I knew something was wrong. I told them you were probably in danger, and they came immediately." "You saved my life," Rose whispered. "You saved this whole town," Sarah replied. "Don't you dare think otherwise." Over the next few hours, Rose gave a detailed statement to the FBI. She showed them the USB drive from George, explained everything she had observed and documented, described her undercover meetings with Meridian Investments. The lead FBI agent, a serious man named Agent Rodriguez, listened carefully to everything. "Ms. Ashford, what you did was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. You put yourself in serious danger." "I know, but I had to protect the people here. You could have contacted us weeks ago. Would you have taken me seriously? An ex-cop with a theory and no evidence?" Agent Rodriguez hesitated, then nodded. "Probably not. Or at least, not quickly enough. The evidence you gathered is excellent. Between your documentation and the bank records, we have a solid case against these criminals. They were laundering money for a drug cartel, moving millions of dollars through small towns across the Midwest." "What about the people of Millbrook? The business owners who signed contracts?" "They're victims, not criminals." We'll work with them to void those contracts and protect them from any legal consequences. And Mr. Wilson, the bank manager, will receive immunity in exchange for his testimony." Rose felt a wave of relief. The innocent people were safe. What about the factory, the promises of jobs? Those were all lies, I'm afraid. Meridian Investments had no intention of actually reopening the factory. They just needed the appearance of legitimate business activity. "I'm sorry." Rose nodded sadly. Millbrook would not be getting those jobs after all, but at least it would not be exploited by criminals. As evening approached, Rose finally went back to her apartment. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely at peace. She had done it. She had protected the town. She had stopped the criminals. And she had proven to herself that she could still be a detective, could still make a difference. More importantly, she had done it without anyone getting hurt. No one had been shot. No one had died. She had been smarter this time, more careful, and even when things went wrong, she had found a way to survive. Maybe she could forgive herself for what happened to James Davidson. Maybe she could accept that mistakes happen, that she had done her best, and that she was still a good person despite her failures. Maybe she could finally heal. The next few days were chaotic. FBI agents remained in Millbrook, interviewing business owners, examining bank records, building their case against Meridian Investments. News reporters descended on the town, wanting to tell the story of the small-town hero who exposed a major money laundering operation. Rose tried to avoid the reporters. She did not want to be called a hero. She had just done what needed to be done. But the people of Millbrook saw her differently. Tom Chen baked her a special cake and brought it to her apartment. "Thank you for saving my business," he said. "If I had signed that contract, I would have lost everything." Maria and Jose Garcia came to thank her, bringing tamales and tears of gratitude. "You protected us when we didn't even know we needed protection." Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Patterson, and dozens of other neighbors stopped by to express their appreciation. The mayor came personally to thank her and apologize for being taken in by Meridian Investments. "They seemed so legitimate," he said sadly. "I wanted so badly to believe that Millbrook could thrive again that I didn't question them carefully enough." "They were very good at what they did," Rose replied. "Professional criminals usually are."
George Wilson was the most emotional. "You saved my son," he said, his voice breaking. The FBI confirmed that the threat against him was based on falsified evidence. Marcus Clay never had the power to bring those charges back. They were just manipulating me with fear. Without your help, I would have continued to participate in their crimes, and eventually I would have gone to prison. You gave me my life back." Rose hugged him, feeling her own tears flow. "We saved each other, George. Your courage in providing that evidence was what gave the FBI the proof they needed." 1 week after the arrests, Rose received a phone call from James Davidson, her former partner. "I heard about what you did in Millbrook," he said. "It's all over the news. Rose, that was incredible." "I was just trying to help people," she said softly. "You did more than help. You stopped a major criminal operation single-handedly. Do you know how rare that is? How impressive?" "James, Rose struggled to find words. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you 5 years ago. I'm sorry you got hurt because of my mistakes." There was a long silence. Then James said gently, "Rose, we've been over this. What happened was not your fault. We were both doing our jobs in a dangerous situation. I never blamed you. The only one who blamed you was yourself." "I know, but I couldn't forgive myself. I couldn't move past it. And now? Can you forgive yourself now?" Rose thought about the past 3 weeks, about how she had used all her detective skills to investigate Meridian Investments, about how she had been smart and careful, about how she had protected people without anyone getting hurt. "Maybe," she said. "I think maybe I can." "Good. Because Rose, you were an excellent detective. You still are. The world needs people like you." After hanging up, Rose sat in her apartment thinking about James's words. She had spent 5 years hiding from her past, convinced she was broken and worthless. But maybe she had been wrong. Maybe one mistake did not define her entire life. The FBI asked her to come to their office the following week to discuss the case. Agent Rodriguez met her in a conference room, along with several other agents. "Ms. Ashford, thanks to your work, we've made significant progress in dismantling a major money laundering network. Meridian Investments was operating in 6 different states, moving over $30 million annually. Your investigation in Millbrook helped us connect the dots and identify all their operations." "I'm glad I could help," Rose said. "You did more than help. Your documentation was thorough and professional. Your undercover work was risky, but effective. And your instincts were absolutely correct from the beginning." Agent Rodriguez paused. "We could use someone with your skills." Rose looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "The FBI is always looking for experienced investigators, especially people with knowledge of financial crimes. Have you ever considered consulting work? We often hire former law enforcement officers as consultants on specific cases." Rose felt something stirring inside her, a feeling she had not experienced in 5 years. Interest, purpose, the desire to use her skills again. "I'm not sure," she said carefully. "I left police work for good reasons. I'm not certain I want to go back." "This wouldn't be the same as being a regular police officer," Agent Rodriguez explained. "Consulting work is different. You work on specific cases, providing expertise and analysis. Less danger, more focus on investigation and strategy. And you could do much of it remotely, from right here in Millbrook, if you wanted." The idea was tempting. Very tempting. "Can I think about it?" Rose asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." Over the next few weeks, Rose considered the offer. She talked to Sarah Mitchell about it. She thought about what she wanted from life. She examined her fears and her strengths. She realized something important. Running away from police work had not healed her. It had just allowed her to hide. Real healing came from facing her fears, learning from her mistakes, and moving forward with wisdom. She also realized that making jewelry and selling it from a table was peaceful, but it was not enough. She needed more purpose. She needed to use her mind and her skills to make a difference. 1 month after the arrests, Rose called Agent Rodriguez. "I've thought about your offer," she said. "I'm interested. But I have conditions." "Name them." "I want to focus on cases involving financial crimes, fraud, corruption. Things where I can investigate without being in dangerous field situations. I want to work mostly from home, with occasional travel as needed. And I want the freedom to say no if a case feels wrong for me." Those terms are all acceptable. Welcome to the team, Ms. Ashford. Rose started her consulting work slowly, taking small cases that required research and analysis. She worked from her apartment in Millbrook, using her computer and her phone, providing expertise to FBI agents in the field. She discovered she was good at it. Without the pressure of being on the front lines, without the immediate danger and split-second decisions, she could focus on what she did best: finding patterns, analyzing data, understanding criminal behavior. And when she did need to go into the field for interviews or observations, she was careful. She prepared thoroughly. She always had backup. She learned from her past mistakes. She also continued making jewelry and selling it from her table in the town square. It gave her a connection to the community, a peaceful counterbalance to her investigation work. and it gave her a perfect cover for her occasional FBI consulting work. No one needed to know that the quiet jewelry lady was also helping solve crimes across the country. Life in Millbrook settled back into its peaceful rhythm. The factory remained empty, but the town was safe. The businesses that had been targeted by Meridian Investments recovered, with the FBI helping them void the fraudulent contracts. George Wilson continued to manage the bank, grateful for his second chance. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the arrests, Rose sat at her jewelry table watching the familiar scene of the town square. Children played by the fountain. Tom Chen served coffee. Mrs. Henderson arranged flowers in her shop window. Tom came over with a free coffee, as always. "How's business, Rose?" "Good. I sold 3 pieces this morning." "I heard you helped the FBI crack another case last week. Something about fraud in construction contracts?" Rose smiled. The town had figured out that she was doing consulting work, though they did not know the details. "I provided some research. Nothing dramatic. Still, it's impressive. Our local hero, still saving people." "I'm not a hero, Tom. I'm just someone who tries to help when I can." "That's what heroes do," Tom said simply. After he left, Rose thought about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe heroism was not about dramatic rescues and gunfights. Maybe it was about using your skills to protect people, about doing the right thing even when it was hard, about continuing to try even after you failed. She thought about Elizabeth Waters, the fake identity she had created. That woman had been confident and fearless, everything Rose had thought she was not. But in the end, Rose herself had been braver than any fake identity. Rose had faced her fears, risked her life, and succeeded. She was stronger than she had believed. Rose touched the small scar on her hand, the one from the warehouse 5 years ago. It no longer made her sad. It was just a reminder that she had survived, that she had learned, that she had grown. A young couple approached her table, looking at the jewelry. "These are beautiful," the woman said. "Did you make them yourself?" "Yes, I did." "That's amazing. Do you sell these full-time?" Rose smiled. "No, this is just one of the things I do. I have other work as well." "What kind of work?" "I'm a consultant. I help solve problems." "That sounds interesting." "It is," Rose said. "It really is." After the couple bought a necklace and left, Rose sat back in her chair, enjoying the warm sunshine and the peaceful scene around her. This was her life now, a balance of peace and purpose, of quiet creativity and important work. She had her jewelry and her consulting. She had her small apartment and her place in the community. She had her past with all its pain and her future with all its possibility. She was 52 years old, with gray in her hair and scars on her hands and memories that would never fully fade. But she was also wise and capable and brave. She was a woman who had made mistakes and learned from them. A woman who had fallen and gotten back up. A woman who had lost herself and found herself again. Rose Ashford was exactly who she needed to be. And Millbrook, the small town that had given her refuge and then given her purpose, was exactly where she needed to be. As the afternoon sun painted the old brick buildings gold, Rose began arranging beads for a new necklace design. Her hands worked with practiced skill, creating something beautiful from simple materials. Just like she had created a new life from the broken pieces of her past. Just like she had found redemption in a small town that needed protection. Just like she had learned that being a hero did not require a badge or a gun. It only required courage, wisdom, and the willingness to do what was right. The silver beads caught the light as Rose worked, each one carefully chosen, each one part of a larger design. Like the moments of her life, each one small but significant, each one contributing to the whole. She smiled, content in this moment, in this place, in this second chance she had been given. The jewelry lady of Millbrook, the retired detective, the woman who saved a town, Rose Ashford, hero. 1 year after the Meridian Investments arrests, Rose received a letter from the FBI. It was an invitation to a special ceremony in Washington, D.C., where she would receive a commendation for her assistance in bringing down a major criminal organization. She almost declined. She did not need recognition or awards. But Sarah Mitchell convinced her to go. You deserve this, Rose. Let yourself be acknowledged for the good work you did. So Rose traveled to Washington wearing her best clothes, feeling nervous and out of place among all the official FBI personnel and government officials. But when Agent Rodriguez handed her the commendation and shook her hand in front of an audience of law enforcement professionals, she felt a surge of pride. Not because of the award itself, but because it represented something important. She had come back from failure. She had healed from trauma. She had proved that one mistake did not define her entire life. The commendation read, "For exceptional service in the investigation and exposure of criminal activity, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and dedication to justice." After the ceremony, several FBI agents approached her, asking if she would consider taking on more consulting work. Apparently, word had spread about her skills, and multiple departments wanted her expertise. Rose accepted several new cases, careful to choose ones that matched her abilities and comfort level. She worked on fraud investigations, corruption cases, financial crime analysis. She became known as someone who could find patterns others missed, who could think like both a detective and a criminal, who could solve complex puzzles. But she always returned to Millbrook, to her jewelry table in the square, to her quiet life in the small town. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned gold and red and the air grew crisp, Rose sat at her table working on a new bracelet design. A young woman approached, looking nervous. "Excuse me, are you Rose Ashford?" "Yes, I am." "I'm Officer Jennifer Martinez from the Millbrook Police Department. I just transferred here from the city. Chief Barnes told me about what you did last year, stopping those criminals. He said if I wanted to be a good detective, I should talk to you." Rose looked at the young officer, seeing in her the same eager determination Rose had once felt. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How did you notice them? How did you investigate? How did you stay safe while gathering evidence? I want to learn from you." Rose smiled. "Sit down. I'll tell you everything I learned. But first, let me teach you the most important lesson." "What's that?" "That being a detective is not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them and doing better next time. It's about protecting people, not proving how brave you are. It's about patience and observation and thinking before you act." Jennifer nodded eagerly, pulling out a notebook. As Rose talked, sharing her knowledge and experience, she realized this was another form of redemption. By teaching the next generation of law enforcement officers, by passing on the lessons she had learned the hard way, she was turning her painful past into something valuable. The sun began to set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town square slowly emptied as people went home for dinner. Rose and Jennifer continued talking, the young officer asking questions, Rose providing answers drawn from decades of experience. When they finally finished, Jennifer stood to leave. "Thank you so much, Miss Ashford. This has been incredibly helpful. Call me Rose, and feel free to come back anytime you have questions. I'm here most days." After Jennifer left, Rose packed up her jewelry table for the evening. As she folded the cloth and arranged the boxes in her carrying case, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a promising young police recruit to a decorated detective, to a broken woman haunted by failure, to a quiet jewelry maker, to an undercover investigator, to an FBI consultant, to a mentor for young officers. Each phase had been necessary. Each lesson had been important. Each mistake and each success had shaped her into who she was today. Rose looked around the town square at the familiar buildings and streets, at the place that had become her home and her salvation. Millbrook had given her refuge when she needed it, and when the town needed protection, she had been there to provide it. It was a fair exchange, a good balance. As she walked back to her apartment, carrying her jewelry case, Rose felt a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded her for so long. She was not the person she had been 5 years ago, broken and lost. And she was not the person she had been 20 years ago, naive and overconfident. She was Rose Ashford, 53 years old, with gray hair and laugh lines and scars both visible and invisible. A woman who made beautiful jewelry and solved complex crimes. A woman who had failed and succeeded, who had fallen and risen, who had lost herself and found herself again. A woman who had learned that heroism came in many forms, that redemption was always possible, and that second chances were precious gifts to be treasured. The evening star appeared in the darkening sky as Rose climbed the stairs to her apartment. Tomorrow, she would set up her table again, would smile at her neighbors, would work on new jewelry designs. And when the FBI called with a new case, she would use her skills to help solve it. This was her life now. Simple and complex, peaceful and purposeful, quiet and meaningful. And Rose Ashford, hero of Millbrook, consultant to the FBI, maker of beautiful things, was exactly where she was meant to be. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.